Yashishtan. Yo so yam stati vyatikaro samya samaya trishtan. Satvena nasuragunan anumeya tattva. Drishyata bhadra karunena vilokanena. Yachtri niketam amalam shipatavanta ravindam. Chanting Sanskrit is not one of my skills. So yam stati vyatikaro pasamaya trishta. Shipatavaninta ravindam. Let that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is understood by truly authorized Vedic literature and who has created peace and prosperity to destroy all calamities of the created world, be kind enough to bestow his glance upon the demigods. His merciful glance can supersede the beauty of the spotless lotus flower, which is the home of the goddess of fortune. Nice verse. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the origin of the cosmic manifestation, is covered by the wonderful activities of material nature, just as outer space or the illumination of the sun and moon is sometimes covered by clouds or dust. It is very difficult to find the origin of the cosmic manifestation. Therefore, material scientists conclude that nature is the ultimate cause of all manifestations, but from Shastra or authentic literature like Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic scriptures, we understand that behind this wonderful cosmic manifestation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in order to maintain the regular procedures of the cosmic manifestation and to be visible to the eyes of persons who are in the mode of goodness, the Lord appears. He is the cause of the creation and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. The demigods, therefore, prayed for his merciful glance upon them in order to be blessed. And then text 58. Evam suraganais tata Bhagavantav abhishtutao labdha valokayar yayatur chin architau gandhamanda madanam. Maitreya said, O Vidura, thus the demigods worshipped with prayers the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appearing as the sage Narayan. The Lord glanced upon them with mercy and then departed for Gandhamadana hill, text 59. Tapimau vai bhagavato Harir angsab ihagato Bharat vyayaya cha bhuva Krishna yadu kuru dvahau. That Narayan Rishi, who is a partial expansion of Krishna, has now appeared in the dynasty of Yadu and Kuru, in the forms of Krishna and Arjuna respectively, to mitigate the burden of the world. Purport. Narayana is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Nara is a part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. Thus, the energy and the energetic together are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Maitreya informed Vidura that Nara, the portion of Narayana, had appeared in the family of the Kurus, and that Narayana, the plenary expansion of Krishna, had come as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with the purpose of delivering suffering humanity from the pangs of material burdens. In other words, Narayana Rishi was now present in the world in the form of Krishna and Arjuna. Krishna Krishna. The title of the chapter, Genealogical Table of the Daughters of Manu. Going back a few verses, this was 57, 58, 59. Back in verse number 53, on the occasion of the appearance of Narayan, the entire world was full of joy. Everyone's mind became tranquil, and thus in all directions, the air, the rivers, and the mountains became pleasant. So there was already the prelude to Narayan Rishi appearing. And the verse prior to that is, the sons and daughters and so forth and so on. It's a long sentence. These 13 daughters produced the following sons. Gives the list of the sons. Medha gave birth to Smriti. Titiksha gave birth to Kshema. Hri gave birth to Prashraya. Murti, the reservoir of all respectable qualities, gave birth to Sri Narayana, Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, from time to time, this comes in Canto 9 also, but genealogical tables, and it just lists and lists and lists and lists, historical lists. And then some name is mentioned, and then sometime Shukadeva Goswami or Sutta is narrating what Shukadeva Goswami narrated. And here it's Vidura and Maitreya having their conversation, which was repeated by Shukadeva Goswami and then Sutta, etc. So, the procedure is, or a symptom is, from time to time, there's just some mention, and then it becomes a expanded discussion on a certain topic. It's one of the parts of the structure of the Bhagavatam. And Narayana Rishi is certainly important. And as he's mentioning here, Narayana Rishi is present in the current age, because there's Vidura, there's Maitreya, and it's their present age. And Narayana Rishi are present in this world as Krishna and Balaram. Excuse me, Krishna and Arjuna. If you just take that separately from the rest of the big picture of the Bhagavatam, it may sound like Narayana Rishi a partial expansion, and Krishna and Arjuna are then therefore partial expansions. But the partial expansion of whom? Partial expansion. So that hit the reset button, and the big picture is Krishna is the source of everything. He's the source of his expanded part, but he's the source of everything. And Narayan is an expansion, a partial expansion. And then the text says, when they appeared, Narayan, everything became auspicious. In the heavenly planets, bands began to play, and they showered flowers from the sky. Thus pacified, sages chanted Vedic prayers, and the denizens of heaven, known as the Gandharvas and Kinnaras, sang. The beautiful damsels of the heavenly planets danced, and in this way, as the time of the appearance of Narayan, or at the time of the appearance of Narayan, all signs of good fortune were visible. Just at that time, the great demigods, like Brahma, also offered their respectful prayers. So that's what we were hearing. The prayers of the demigods to Narayan. And this genealogical table and all of this is Maitreya to Vidura. One comment is the demigods, they're in a very special position because they have the opportunity to directly see the Supreme Lord and his appearances and activities and so forth and so on. They can directly see. So that's very wonderful. However, a very nice comparison or contrast is made by Lord Brahma is the cowherd in Brahma Vimohan Leela. He's offering prayers to Krishna and saying, we demigods, we can see, but the cowherd boys, they participate. So although they're little boys, they're much our superior because we can't participate. They participate directly. And the way they participate is quite amazing. And we can see the amazing participation, but we can't participate. We can't have those same feelings and, transcendental love feelings. We can have something, but it's not the same. The impetus from, that's the 10th canto, this is 4th canto. The impetus is for those who are hearing Srimad Bhagavatam to appreciate the good fortune of not just the cowherd boys, but all the residents of Vrindavan directly participating in loving dealings. And all the residents, all the denizens of Vrindavan, whatever that might be. The water, the trees, the birds, the this and the that. How fortunate. Because they're directly in contact with Krishna and engaging according to their mood, their rasa. They have different exchanges. Part of the idea, a big part of the idea, is for us to look up and feel, wow, special appreciation and affinity for those who are presently in association with the personality of Godhead. And of course, by hearing these narrations, the whole idea of hearing these narrations is coverings are removed and qualification is awakened, and the affinity, when one is hearing properly, the affinity for aspiring for that kind of opportunity to directly participate in the pastimes of the personality of Godhead awakens if the hearing is done properly or nicely from the right source, etc. It's easy to for me. It's easy to appreciate. Another wow. How fortunate are we to have this kind of association? The Bhagavatam itself is all auspicious. However, there are renderings of the Bhagavatam that are not the same as what we are experiencing. There may be some devotees in the room or in our congregation that also had that opportunity when they were younger. I'm looking at Juna Jivana, the Northern Illinois University fellow that kept asking another question. He came up afterwards, and he was asking a question. I think it was afterwards about Ajamila. Wasn't during the class, it was after, right? So he had this doubt. And the doubt that he had was because he heard the story of Ajamila from his grandfather that was not proper. But he knew the story, kind of. And when he heard from his grandfather, it could be like went 4 times. That's not how it happened. That's not how it happened. That's not how it happened. So then, here's how it happened, but my grandfather said, okay, but it's not how it happened. So it's some appreciation, but also then distorted. So the story he heard was Ajamila said Narayan 3 times, and he achieved moksha. So how's that? If I say Narayan 3 times, moksha? What's the lesson? So that's not how it ended. He, the second chance, as the book, The Second Chance. So that the second chance was he went to the Himalayas and resided in a Vishnu temple and engaged in bhakti yoga and achieved spiritual perfection despite the prior contamination of sinful, 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 sinful. Although the beginning wasn't like that. It was the beginning was a Brahmana by birth and trained in Brahminical ways, but that wasn't sufficient. So, and it wasn't moksha like he just merged or something like that. He returned to the spiritual world. And there's, nice ways, different ways people can return to the spiritual world. So how fortunate we are to hear from the right source. Not only the story is correct, instead of hearing from her grandfather, not hearing it all, that's another misfortune. But hearing it not properly narrated, that's another misfortune. And not only that, hearing in such a way that the potency is there to awaken affinity for the spiritual realm, for being an active participant in Krishna's pastimes. And the the method is the method of hearing. Then, there becomes from the right source and the qualitative way of hearing, because just like the Mahamantra, there's quantitative and then there's qualitative. Anyway, within Krishna's holy name, everything is there. And the realization of everything that's within Krishna, was within his holy name, is available, potentially. But then it depends on the qualitative way that one hears. Same, the Bhagavatam. There's a nice passage in Chaitanya Bhagavat that indicates, a similar message. Although Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't have to hear the Bhagavatam in order to get realizations, he relished so much so that hundreds of times he would hear specifically pastimes of Dhruva, the pastimes of Prahlad, hundreds of times. So that's another kind of hearing. It's not just so that one can enter into Krishna's pastimes or the Lord's pastimes with him, but the sweetness of those pastimes. And all of that, properly heard from the right source is being handed to us. Please take it. Anyway, just all of that is just how fortunate we are. So we're going to read verse 57 again. This is the demigods offering their prayers to Narayan, because he's just appeared. Let that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is understood by truly authorized Vedic literature and who has created peace and prosperity to destroy all calamities of the created world, be kind enough to bestow his glance upon the demigods, His merciful glance can supersede the beauty of the spotless lotus flower, which is the home of the goddess of fortune. So the language is fantastic. Their mood is fantastic. And just to repeat, they're observers. They're not participants. But how does an observer, how can we, by hearing, become qualified to be a participant? The channel or the method is pure devotional service. And because I've been immersed, like super immersed, in this description by Kapila Dev in the explanation of devotional service, chapter 29, the way that it ends it's really fantastic. Kapila Dev ends the chapter by saying, these are the characteristics of one who has achieved pure devotional service. It's there in the early part, it's there in the conclusion. It's really fantastic. And the purpose of his explanation is to carry his mother and the rest of us to the point of pure devotional service. But there's some obstacles in the way. The major obstacle that's in the way, that's the main part of the chapter. What's going on with my voice? The main part of the chapter is describing what those obstacles are and how to overcome those obstacles, and step by step come to where there's no obstacles anymore. But the starting point is there's obstacles, and the obstacles have to do with our material contamination. Not the obstacle is bhakti itself, but our material contamination. And then, so the fullness of bhakti doesn't come through. So the demigods are praying for a glance. Just like we heard yesterday evening. By Krishna's glance, the cowherd boys were brought back from the dead. No, there's some passages that describe they became unconscious, and others that they died. And then after they came back, they start wondering, what's going on? We died. And here we are. What happened? So whether it was died or unconscious, the glance of Krishna is powerful. The glance of Mahavishnu brings about the whole of the creation. Why the glance of Krishna can't take living entities, because they're living entities. And it doesn't say that they left their body and went somewhere else. These are Krishna's eternal associates. So what's the question of death? Or well, whatever kind of death that might mean, it's a pastime. But his glance, and in other places, Lord Ramachandra glancing, there's different versions of Ramayana, but just glancing at the ocean, and the ocean started to boil. And the aquatics in the ocean were in great distress. So the ocean personified, or Samudra, came and, gosh, I'm sorry. Didn't know who you were. Contact with the personality of Godhead. Here the demigods are praying for his glance, his favorable glance. And his favorable glance is they're stating can't supersede the beauty of the spotless lotus flower, which is the home of the goddess of fortune. Yesterday we heard about the lotus feet. Any part of the Lord's body, Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Ritimanti, any part of his body can do what another part of his body can do. So his glands or his feet or whatever, dust from his feet, mercy particles, this Srimad Bhagavatam. Gosh. Srimad Bhagavatam is a way of those mercy particles coming to our ear just through sound. Now, we may understand or not understand, but it's what's going on in any case. And to the degree that the affinity for the personality of God has awakened, then that's going to be our experience. Because the poets, the Vaishnava poets, they're not fiction writing. They're describing what's going on. And it although it's poetic, it doesn't reduce the veracity of what they're saying. This sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam has that same, as the demigods are praying, glance that can supersede the lotus upon which the personality of Godhead, the goddess of fortune resides, or is her home. It's nice to hear and meditate on what we're hearing, so it goes in. Otherwise, it's not so difficult to try to appreciate. Try to receive the storyline and not really capture the essence. If there's devotees here that have not yet heard Radhika Raman's seminar on churning the topics of Shastra, please listen. One of the points that he makes is, there's many points. One of the points is when hearing or when reading or when contacting scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam in particular, try to appreciate not just transactional, that what am I going to get from this? Because that's part of what this weekend's presentation is going to also say. But what's the purpose? What's the intention of the author or the speaker or the compiler, Vyasadeva, Shukadeva Goswami? What is their intention? So like here, what's the intention? What's the purpose of hearing a genealogical table? It's information. But is it more than information? Particularly, like this structure. There's this list and list and list and list, and then Narayana, then there's a whole series of verses about Narayana. And, that genealogical table has of interest to us because in that line comes Narayana. And then hearing about Narayana. And hearing from the demigods about wishing to get his glance. then what's the intention behind the narrator? And here it's Maitreya, but it's Sukadeva Goswami and it's Sutta Goswami and it's Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva, we can hold him accountable for compiling all this. So what was his purpose? Then the purpose is loving attraction for the personality of Godhead. And loving attraction means minimally wanting to be in humble service that's pleasing. And then the fruit of that is, as he so desires, let us participate directly in loving dealings, as he so desires. Now, it's good to keep the intention of the speaker in mind when hearing or reading or studying. Because otherwise it's, the conventional is transactional. It's easy. Or it's easy because we're conditioned to do it. That's why it's easy. You do something to get something. Go to our what we study. Years and years. How many hours in the room here have persons taken part in study of something? University, this, da, 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 da. And it's transactional. This will help me get a good grade, and a good grade means that it's all towards what I'm going to get. It's selfish. It's not what is. It's not higher. It doesn't bring one to a higher position, and that tendency of studying scripture can be like that too. We'll hear some more as we're over the weekend. This is right in these teachings of Kapila. And taking those topics and looking at it through different scriptural sources and different lenses, and how to get out of the conundrum of worship that's an imitation. Mad bhaktim labate param. It's a nice verse. It's all over the place, and it's easy to not catch it. Brahmabhuta prasanatma nasochati nikangsati samaksarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. That which is not imitation is where it's Brahmabhuta stage. Say it negatively. Prior, it's imitation. Imitation is not bad. A child can imitate mom and dad to, do devotional service, and it's nice. But when it's not just imitation standard, but, the real thing, that's the platform of self-realization. Nasoshati nakangsati samaksarveshu bhuteshu. That's Kapila's message. Mad bhakti, then devotional service begins. Wow. So what are we doing? Practice. So he doesn't condemn practice, but practice should be done with the right purpose. And a big part of the right purpose, a focus that is in that chapter is when there's regard for other living entities as the sitting place of the same deity that was being worshipped on the altar. We have a long way to go. We're in a good place. It's being the recipients of the Goswamis and the Bhagavatam and the right understanding and not the wrong understanding or not so many other options. But we have a long way to go. I'm going to tell those story and they're going to end. In the final session of this respect, there's a little story. A little story is a Shastra story where there was a king and an astrologer. So there's two parts. The king heard of a qualified astrologer, so he asked the astrologer to read his chart. And the astrologer said, by looking at your chart, I can see that your family members and those dear to you in your family line, they're all going to die before you. And the king was furious because he was attached to his family members. He had him arrested, put in jail. So then the king was curious, maybe I can hear. So he found, consulted another astrologer. The second astrologer saw the same thing in his chart that the first astrologer did. But he expressed it to him differently. Same message. You're going to live a long life. And you'll live such a long life that you'll outlive even your family members. The king was very pleased. He rewarded him handsomely, many gifts. And so how something is spoken, how to speak the truth pleasingly. It's certainly in Bhagavad Gita chapter 17, but it's in other places, and where the sensitivity of the other person is being considered, and that's what guides what one says and does. And if that's missing, then you can be right but dead wrong, or in jail, or by the laws of nature, receive because it hasn't been done properly. So we have a long way to go. This topic, what I just spoke, this seminar that you've been teaching, empathic communication, it's the same thing, just said differently. But then, there's a lot of scripture besides, the fellow that generated nonviolent communication. It's laws of nature, and they're laws of nature that harsh has its result, both to the speaker and to the one who's heard it. How to live in a way that Krishna is pleased. Very simply put. And go circle back. Kapila is telling his mother, those persons, he goes further, those persons that see themselves separate, I fill their hearts with fear. And it's something else. There's directly in the verse itself. There's not happiness, that the natural happiness of the soul, even one is worshiping the Supreme Lord. It's right in Kapila's teachings. So it's not like that doesn't happen to those who are non-devotees. It certainly happens to those who are non-devotees. But the razor is very fine. You have to be very attentive when you're using razors. You can have a bloody mess if you're not attentive. Even with safety razors, you have to be very attentive. And then know how to apply the razor properly. It's not like scare tactic. It's just how to get from where we are to where we want to go. And then that destination is super fantastic. It's where we want to go. And the Bhagavatam is, extending to us, reaching out, please take my hand and follow me, kind of a message. It's not just, transactional. It's a relationship with Krishna in the form of his sound vibration, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then that sound vibration can carry one to being a participant in, not just an observer. But it takes some purification. Okay. Discussion? Premananda.
It's good, Maharaj. Thank you so much. About this transactional way of doing things. The transactional way of doing things. Actually, that word did not come to my mind, but exactly that is what I was thinking so much in the past few weeks when I was traveling, and from what I have learned. I was wondering, like people like us, most of us sitting here, with the exception of Prabhu, we are all from the Indian families, and we have certain cultural backgrounds, and it has its advantage that we grew up in devotional families, and there is something which has nurtured us that, for most of us, faith is not at all the issue. It is about, along with the fact that many of us are sent to colleges and trained in certain ways, and we have certain type of an intelligence, which I am seeing, looking at myself or looking at anyone with whom I'm friends with, even after having come to the platform of spiritual practice to some extent, some purposefully, somehow or other by the association. But this transactional way of doing things is very, very prominent in our
Yoga.
And I was wondering if this has something to do with the cultures in which we are born also, because it threw me back so many years ago when you started coming here to Chicagoland to preach. I still remember when you come somewhere to the house or any program, you used to touch the edge of the table to see if there is any dust, and you may not even say something, you will just show your finger. And so that this is like years, what is this? I think over 40 years I have known you, and this was 40 years ago. I have seen you trying to point it to us that there is a refined way of doing things. And I don't know how much of that has registered into each one of us. The degree of receptivity is different. Even if it has registered, to what extent it has been translated. And even after studying so much scriptures and books under the guidance of yourself and so many Vaishnavas who come here, still, even in reading practices and everything, to what degree have we refined ourselves? Of course, it may vary individual to individual. And yet, this was my first exposure to a different culture, like a European culture. And I was seeing so much of artistic taste and refinement in those devotees. And I just wondered, is it like it's a cultural thing?
Yes. There's several thoughts. It's personal and cultural, both. Some persons are artistic, and the way that artistic feature unfolds, a lot depends upon their environment, and as well as their past samskaras and all of that. So they're, in different parts of Europe or different parts of the world, there's different propensities of art and music and different types of art and so on and so on and so on. So it can help. It helps support such refinement. If the teachers are right and the culture is right and so forth. And then the opposite. However, largely modernity is transactional. It just has found its way into Kali Yuga, and it's advancing more and more and more. And so it takes becoming aware of what that is, what it looks like, and then making a conscious choice, to put it in simple terms, let me please Krishna instead of that. Make choices accordingly. And depending upon, but just, I'm going to narrate on the final presentation of this little story. One sannyasi was traveling in South India. He was with his assistant and an Indian devotee, and they were traveling by car. And they didn't have the proper plan, and so towards the end of an entire day, they became very tired and hungry. And there wasn't a temple near where they were. So the Indian devotee, this is a nice story. It has a very happy ending, more than happy ending. So the Indian devotee made a suggestion. Let's find a pujari somewhere, like completely unknown pujari somewhere, and they're generally very hospitable. They like to feed a sannyasi. They like to accommodate. So it's being a culture. So I unknown how this Indian devotee found, but he found a pujari of a Shiva temple, Grahasta. And the way the details we'll narrate later, but he was treated like a king. Washed their feet, all three of them, washed their feet, dried their feet, performed arti for all three of them, and a meal with 30 different preparations. And the pujari and his wife and the extended family, not just his own children, but, they were there bringing dishes and serving with chanting of mantras while all this was going on, each of these different stages of things. It was like a festival. It was, it's culture, how you receive a guest. And Then afterwards, again, they washed their feet and again arti, and then had them sit and, find out. And they hadn't eaten. They were just serving. And, there was somebody they didn't even know. The family didn't know. They didn't know the family. They may never see them again. Who knows? But the culture, in a remote place. So it's still existing in some places, in some cases, but that's culture. And how did the devotees feel? Oh, and then they gave some gifts. Money and some other items, just because that's part of it's part of culture. They don't, they would never see that. So, and then comes, those that aren't cultured. Engage in devotional service, yes, but without culture, without refinement, with a transactional mood towards hearing of scripture and dealing with, etc. And so it's like what to do, so at least, the way that whoever came up with this nice idea have seminars on Vaishnava etiquette with a pointed purpose behind it. Now, this particular, what I'm going to end. I'm eager to hear because I know that Urmila is very thoughtful. She really prepares. She's planning, and she's probably going to end up writing a book on the topic that she's going to speak about, because she's so comprehensive and thorough. So I'm sure that, that the experience for those that participate is going to be impactful and probably memorable, but help us become persons of more refined etiquette than normal. It's the notion is nice. Then what's the reality? We'll see what happens. Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking, I may sound like a racist because, again, repeating that we Indian people, we have this cultural advantage, definitely.
Yes. And, definitely.
But if the cultural advantage is something really nice, and it really is congenial for having a spiritual life. But it will not work. I felt really deep within my heart that without refinement, we are not going to go anywhere. And maybe, to some extent, but you will never be able to.
Something.
So there is so much to be learned from other people. And so while we are in the habit of going through this routine, the motion of doing things, and particularly in DT department, and what to speak about study of scriptures. And you talked about Radhika Raman Prabhu's classes on studying the scriptures. So there is so many different aspects in the practice of spiritual life which requires fine-tuning. And you have been telling this for 40 plus years. And the progress, probably what we have made, is probably like so tiny. And, I'm looking at myself only. It was really an eye-opening experience for me to think about this. And I was so much wanting to share it at least in our Pujari department. That's where I can begin. But I mean, I myself, I'm not anywhere. But still, I feel that, there is so much that we can learn even in this world, the way people coming from different cultures, what they bring, certain values, so that how do we, seminars is one way, but I was just wondering, how do we share that with everyone around us, that just don't go through life like a bull in a china shop, crashing everything, rather than take some little bit of a time and pause and introspect and do it in a nice way, even in a temple setting.
The opportunity is there, and at some point in time, for everyone, a little light can go on, and a little light that says, what you're saying. I need refinement. So that's, how long it'll take. That's how long it's going to take. That's how long. But a little light goes on that says refinement. And then, alignment with the proper standard. And I'm not there yet. So, that's the sadhana stage. And the sadhana stage is what's the purpose? And if I just do sadhana, I'm not meditating on or aspiring for what the purpose of sadhana is. It's going to be really slow. Okay. Something else. Yeah.
Guru Maharaj, there was a sentence in the purport, the last one that you read, that sparked a series of thoughts. Prabhupada said that the plenary expansion of Krishna had come as Krishna with the purpose of delivering suffering humanity from the pangs of material burdens. And I was thinking, just within my lifespan, I can see how time deteriorates and the material burdens just seem to exponentially become more oppressive, and whether it's relationships or the political climate that we live in. And there's this statement that I want to have faith in and I have a doubt about, which is that the first 10,000 years after the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, they're the golden age within Kali Yuga. And given that it seems time only deteriorates things, there was this incredible purity that came with the presence of Srila Prabhupada and those who are so devoted to him. And we know that over time, that association is going to be lost. And yes, we will continue the mission, and those who come after us will continue the mission. But 10,000 years, it just seems like everything's deteriorating so fast that it seems pretty incomprehensible to me that there can still be a golden age several years from now.
Well, the golden age has to do with the holy name. No, a proponent of the holy name that lives by the benefits that the holy name bears with it, the potential is there within this present age, and there are Vaishnavas. I mean, without naming names, there are Vaishnavas that are quietly, perhaps, but in a very powerful way, quietly moving hearts in the right direction. So, and then on the strength of the holy name and the reciprocation that comes from proper hearing of the scripture, along with chanting of the holy name, and then worship. So, 10,000 years. That means that the holy name for 10,000 years has that potency, and persons can bear that potency or not. within those 10,000 years, here's like, for example, I'm going to end with this. For example, some of those 10,000 years have already passed. And during the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, previous, prominent acharyas had become less. Still some pure devotees, but prominent acharyas had become less. And as a result, deviations in Lord Chaitanya's teachings. That's nothing wrong with Lord Chaitanya's teachings, but the Apasampradaya folks were abundant during his time. And so he did what he did, and then Bhaktisiddhanta did what Bhaktisiddhanta did, and then Prabhupada did what Prabhupada did. So the surcharged with opposition, yes, but the message of the Bhagavatam, as it says in the Bhagavatam, and the message of the potential is there, and at any point, it can be picked up. The sun doesn't stop shining because it's Kali Yuga. So a proper receiver can make it manifest. Okay. I'm going to end. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.